welcome to Electric Liberty Land here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
Hey, what's up, cheeseheads? Well, weren't we all a little bit cheese-headed rooting for our boy Aaron Rodgers, the one solo, well, not solo, because Cole Beasley had spoken out for the Buffalo Bills fame, but they are now eliminated from the playoffs in the NFL. And yeah, I was sad to see it. Aaron Rodgers knocked out in an ugly game of NFL footballs over the past weekend here. And I know maybe some of you aren't that into football. I am. I enjoy football, even though I acknowledge, yes, the NFL is quite adept at pushing the jingoism, the patriotism, the empire building that America has become so famous for. And of course, into conning many people into signing up for the military might of the United States, helping to push the narrative that we are a force for global good. And meanwhile, just sending boys and girls off to die in foreign lands that really have zero impact on them. Which, by the way, I did my Good Morning Fuckhead, which of course, you can find Good Morning Fuckhead rants every day at our Patreon or our locals, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals. My morning rants, 5 to 7 to 10 minutes here on a topic. Today I was talking about Jen Psaki and her language of empire, namely talking about how she's talking about the eastern flank of the way it sounds, our eastern flank, right? She's talking about NATO countries. She's talking about Russia and the Ukraine, which I'm not really going to get into today. I'm going to save it, talk about that maybe next week. Maybe I'll bring in, I'm going to have Anthony Samaroff on next week's episode. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about that with him since he hails from the EU. But yeah, Jen Psaki saying our eastern flank as though the United States is in Europe. But regardless, clearly the terms of empire, right? The language of empire. So yes, I acknowledge the NFL's role in empire building, and by virtue of all of the patriotism, they get paid gobs of money from the Navy, the Army, the Marines, you name it, they're getting money for it, rolling out the American flag, flying the jets over the stadiums, all that good shit. By the way, I got gypped. I was in Tampa Bay for the worst football game ever played 2 weekends ago. My beloved Eagles got crunched by the Brady Buccaneers, who then in turn got eliminated. And I'm looking up, figure, let's see my tax dollars at work here. You know, fly me over a stealth fighter, fly me over some Blue Angels, fly me over something that's going to make a lot of noise, that's going to terrify children. You know, give me that feeling of a young Afghani looking into the skies and seeing my imminent doom coming down on me. And instead, I was simply treated to what looked like a 747. I was like, this is the fucking playoffs. Can you get a better airplane to fly over this if my tax dollars are paying for it? Anyway, one of the things that did happen, though, of course, as I said, Aaron Rodgers has been outspoken in his critiques of vaccines, of vaccine mandates. He trolled the living hell out of the left, which was hilarious on a recent appearance wherein he had Ayn Rand behind him. He had, I think it was Atlas Shrugged, or either that or it was The Fountain. I think it was Atlas Shrugged, though, was behind him on a bookshelf. And when asked about it, Aaron Rodgers said, I put that specifically on the bookshelf behind me because I knew it would drive people crazy. That's hilarious. Even if he hasn't read it. And he said he hasn't. He goes, oh, it's too long. I haven't read it. I understand, man. I haven't read it either. Yep, I know. Go ahead. Send me your hate mail. I haven't read it either. I don't feel the need. I should, just to see how it's written from a narrative perspective as a writer myself, but it is long. I don't have time. Maybe I'll listen to it on book or on book. Maybe I'll listen to it on tape, which is how I imbibe most of my content now, even though I avidly do enjoy reading, but God, I just don't have the time. But I love Aaron Rodgers, and I always appreciate him as a fellow dick. Hail, fellow dick, well met, I guess you could say, is my opinion of Aaron Rodgers. I admire his skills as a quarterback, even though he hasn't had a ton of success winning Super Bowls. But I was heartbreaking to see him lose in this past playoffs, mostly because I wanted, just as Aaron Rodgers trolled the left with his Atlas Shrugged on the shelf behind him, because he knows these people lose their minds over the smallest shit, I wanted to enjoy the seething hatred should he have won the Super Bowl. He still may get MVP. You know, it's possible. Maybe the Super Bowl winner, maybe Patrick Mahomes will win it overall, but he could still get MVP. I want him to be MVP of everything. Defensive Player of the Year. I want him to get that. I want him to get awards for women's water polo. I don't care what it is. I want to see him get these awards as somebody that was willing to speak out, take the slings and the arrows, and it is a contract year, basically, where he can either get traded or signed away by another team, and he's very close and made it clear he wants out of Green Bay. So, interesting timing, but the player of his caliber probably won't matter what his politics are, but you wonder if it would come into play at all. So, risky time, but still, he's making solid points about how insane it is that they're forcing these players to get them, how the NFL has now dropped. Coincidentally, though the playoffs starts, COVID went away, guys. Good news. COVID went away in the NFL. No more positive tests. No more people being held out of games during the playoffs. Weird. Because, a week before, the Eagles had 17 players on the COVID list. Now, 2 weeks ago, they had 0. Nobody from any of the playoff games is out for COVID. Just gone with the wind. Amazing how that happens. But it goes to showcase just how ridiculous, just how farcical all of this has been to begin with, and how the vast, vast majority of these players are simply asymptomatic. They were testing. No more testing of asymptomatic players, right? The vast majority of players had the sniffles at worst. And I'm sure some of them have some symptoms. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure with how prevalent Omicron is, with how fast it spreads, some of these players have symptoms, and they're just going, looks like a cold to me. Let's keep that under wraps because we want to get that money. We want to advance in the playoffs. We don't need this black eye right now. So, rest in peace, Aaron Rodgers, Super Bowl hopes. But may he live on. Trolling through the offseason, I pray to you, almighty Omicronius, let it be so. So, I titled the episode, and by the way, I want to tell you guys, I mentioned our Patreon. Please go support us there or on Locals. We've got, as I said, my show, Good Morning Fuckhead. We're wrapping up Degenerate Gamblers, which is our season-long, during the NFL season show, where we gamble. We let you gamble with us. If we lose, if you can beat us, and right now, we've had some people that are looking like they're going to win some merch. We send you a t-shirt, right? You get it, and it's for free. We let you play for free. That's just our way of thanking our patrons. But we have a lot of fun, a lot of trash talk, a lot of gambling and wagers being made. And of course, if you want to use those in the real world and make you some money, you go after and you go get it. I've done pretty well this season personally, which is always nice. But we also have Conspiracy Corners. They're recording another one, I think, this upcoming week. We also have my Do Nothing Man episodes. I'm going to be issuing another one of those very soon. We also have our extra, streams you can get on our Facebook page. You can watch those live streaming on, we're back on YouTube for now. So you can watch those with our YouTube links and watch that stuff live in addition to interviews, bonus content, etc. So join there, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals. So I titled the episode, Don't Let Them Disarm You. Now, you might be going, what the hell are you talking about? I haven't seen any new gun legislation out there aimed at least not on a federal level. There's always some Democrat somewhere trying to take away your guns on a local or state level. But I mean this more overarchingly because I just couldn't help noticing that everything going on right now is in an effort to disarm you. Now, this could take different ways, different styles of approach, be it kind of like Kung Fu, right? There's hard Kung Fu, which is when you punch it with all your might. Then there's kind of the soft Kung Fu. There's, move like the water Kung Fu, flow with your enemy, kind of the judo style flow, use your enemy against him type of thing. The government's using all approaches here, but they're going after you to try to disarm you in the different ways in which you hold power. Right? The ways in which you can arm yourself against government, against somebody taking away your freedom, your liberty. Right? And we look at what they've been doing. We already know there's a full-out assault on weaponry. That much we see. We see it back and forth on a daily basis. You can see why it's so vitally important for the government to take away your weapons. You have a situation like Australia has where you can literally, my dog, of course, she's going to fucking bark right in the most, literally have concentration camps for people that don't want to be vaccinated. You have scenarios like in Spain, in the Basque region, where you've got the government beating people in the streets because they didn't want to go along with, I'm blanking on what the actual thing was. This was like 2 years ago now, but they objected to some government measures. They're being beaten in the streets. Beaten by the cops. There's no guns there. They can't fight back. You have these situations happening all over the world at all times in places where guns have been removed. So, of course, guns are always going to be at the forefront. You have in London where the knife attacks have skyrocketed. Them talking about restricting what knives you can buy in the stores. So, obviously, that's going to be something they want to restrict. So, that's the literal definition of disarming you. But that's not what it's all about. That's one of the many ways in which they want to try to keep you complacent, to keep you from being able to defend yourself. Of course, the second way we've seen a lot of attacks on is information. They want to disarm you in ways in which you can imbibe content or information or narratives or straight facts that don't agree with the overarching narratives. We saw, Mark just had Del Bigtree on. Now, Del, you don't have to agree with everything he's putting out there. But if you listen to that interview, he does talk about putting out information about these vaxes that may not go with what you've heard, with what your doctors told you, with what the CDC is telling you. Now, he's sending you emails with straight facts and stats that he wants you to make your own decisions of, and it's important to do that. Don't listen to my word for it on anything I'm telling you. Don't listen to Mark's word. Don't listen to Dell's word. Don't listen to John's word. You have to make your own choices in life, but they want to seek to make that almost impossible. Now, we're seeing different ways in which they're blocking content being shared. We see countries like, again, Australia, which can block different websites from even getting through to their population. We see what's going on with Google in Australia. We see they're blocking content being shared because they want Google to share and pay out these news people, but blah, blah. It's like there's all these layers, but the end result is that you're not getting information. You're not getting news stories. The government can turn off that spigot. Now, we look at cases like in Cuba, and you see that they can turn off the internet as a whole with the flick of a switch. Now that gives, since everything is on the internet now, that essentially gives them full control over the narrative, what's coming in and out as far as information's passed, unless you have a fleet of carrier pigeons. Unless you have somebody that's physically flying in to deliver that news, it's going to be coming through the newspapers, which are easy to edit, easy to control. Look at what Russia did back in the day with all their various Pravda outlets. And now we also look at Facebook, social media, the interactions and the ties in with government there, the quote unquote fact checkers, which are simply activists working in regards to, name a topic, climate change, which is another divisive issue. And I'll get back to that because property is another way to disarm you. Climate change, COVID vaccines, election information, quote unquote disinformation, foreign information / disinformation. So we see the common trend here. Controlling information and thus disarming your ability to fight back against them in information warfare, or to have a candid discussion with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors, to figure out who is in fact your enemy and who you have more in common with than you do in differentiation. We see how many people hate each other, outwardly hate each other, call for the destruction of each other, call for deplatforming, call for people to be thrown out of schools districts, call for children to be sent home. This is information warfare. This is arming people. And we are, trust me, from the viewpoint of these people in power, we are soldiers. Without a doubt. They look upon us, the Democratic Party looks upon the people that they've conned into thinking that racism is the sole thing that controls the actions of this country, that have conned people into believing that COVID is going to kill you instantly and that you go to the hospital 50% of the time if you catch it. That or the GOP that has convinced, well, not just the GOP, neocons or neoliberals that have convinced everybody that we have to go to war over the Ukraine. They are enlisting soldiers, and the easiest way to enlist soldiers is information flow control. Why do you think I'm talking about the NFL? Why do you think I'm talking about all of that messaging that's put out there? The flying of the flag, the Pledge of Allegiance in these government schools, these corporate-run government schools, to convince you, to convince your children, to wean you onto their point of view and to enlist you as soldiers, compliant, willing, complicit soldiers. So information, disarm you and take away your ability to figure out what's real, what's fake. Another one. Property, right? I mentioned climate change. Now, Klaus Schwab, who of course has now been mentioned in many recent interviews, not just on our podcast, but on other podcasts, Klaus Schwab, who is famous for the Great Reset, is part of this World Economic Forum, which is to blame for quite a few of the more rabid, fanatical leftist / progressive proposals that are being put forward as far as taking away things like property in the name of climate change, right? In climate change, you can't be trusted to run your own farm. You can't be trusted to buy your own car with its proper fuel. You can't be trusted to farm in the correct way. You can't be trusted to build your house in the correct way, right? And we're seeing these regulations be pushed through. In the UK, they're talking about literally forcing people to tear off their roofs because of climate change, right? Because they have to have only the finest insulation in people's houses, because otherwise you're wasting precious fuel. You're wasting precious gas to just allow it to seep out into the atmosphere. So there's proposals on the books and people are out there protesting, right? The soldiers for the cause are protesting and chanting and cheering to get this motion passed that would force people to tear off their roofs and rebuild them at great personal cost, either to the taxpayer or to the persons themselves, right? Or the landlord, whoever it might be. This is an attack on property. This is an attack on your own personal freedom to live your life as you see fit in your domicile, to control what happens in your own house. Same thing with this promise that we will no longer have property, right? Everybody will rent and you'll be so happy because of it. Again, this is an assault on property. Property is power. Why do you think the government and governments worldwide maintain so much control over land? Why do you think the federal government, even on land that they've never had any real claim to, considers something like 50% of the available land in the United States to be federal property, not state property, where it should rightly, if there is a quote unquote right way to do it, it would be that the states own those lands. But no, the federal government owns those lands, even though they reside in the states. You're not allowed to homestead them. You're not allowed to take that land, make it into something that's yours, even though they're not doing shit with it. But it's theirs because land is property, right? Or land is power, excuse me. And property is power. And the federal government knows that all too well. That's why we have borders. That's why we have fences and protections and soldiers in the first place. Property is power. And you have the amount of property that you own dictates quite a bit of power in as far as how you affect your legislation, how you affect your local governments, how you affect the people around you. It is power personified. If you own enough land, for Christ's sake, you can develop your own little army, right? The government knows this, they acknowledge this, and thus they want to attack your property. They attack your, again, disarm you from having that lever of power as a wedge against them, or to influence other people to act against them, or even just as a simple measure of protection, right? If nobody owns property, well, then you can be evicted at any time. And that comes far more easy when you talk about money and how they're trying to disarm your ability to control, own, spend your own money at your own will. We talked about digital currencies. We talk about how Bitcoin is a wonderful thing, and it is. But now you have China, now you have the United States, now you have France and Germany, and all of these other countries, the UK, designing their own digital currencies. But they put this little caveat in the UK, there's a very specific caveat that's being pushed back against, which is that they can limit what you spend that money on. But let's not forget, they can also track you. The great thing about paper money is they can't track you where you're going. You can escape, you can get away, you can go somewhere else, and you can trade that currency in a faraway land to get the hell out of Dodge. Now, governments have put into place, and especially the United States, measures where even if you want to leave the country, now you want to expatriate yourself, well, guess what? They still want a huge chunk of your income. Call it an exit fee, right? Huge chunk of your income, because it's all in digital currency, right? The majority of what you own is in your bank accounts. They can track it. They can keep it. Now imagine that's digital currency. You want to leave the country? We're going to close that bank account. We're going to deny your ability to bank, to access your own money. And if it's digital currency, well, we can turn it off. If you dare to leave the country, we can have an automatic switch, which turns off should you try to use our currency outside of these borders. Now, you pair that, right, that ability to turn off funding with this political environment wherein, and I can't remember if I talked about this or not, Mike Lindell, right, the MyPillow guy. Mike Lindell, as far as I can see, His only crime is that he put out information or opinion that was contrary to the narrative, predominantly about the elections, saying that it was stolen. Now, this, of course, going back to information disarming you and your ability to fight information with other information or decide for yourself what is truth and what is not truth, that sin against the state has now reached a zenith wherein his accounts, right, his bank accounts have been turned off. He is no longer able to bank with, whatever it was, mid-bumblefuck, trust, whatever they were called. That's been turned off. Now he has to find another financial institution to take him. But now, because the precedent has been set that he is such a dangerous man, according to the government, because he dared to voice a sentiment that wasn't in line with the government narrative, he is such a dangerous man. If you're a bank, are you going to take his money or not? Especially as you have these mega banks through, they're talking about fighting big tech, fighting big banks and all this other shit, but big banks have still bought up little banks all over the country. You're probably going to depend on a smaller bank to take that on. Because the big corporate banks, they probably already have their hands in the pockets of the government and vice versa. They've got lobbyists. They can have a lot of pressure exerted on them not to take his account. So it'd probably be some smaller bank that says, this is a big account for us. This is probably the biggest account that we're ever going to have. We'll take that chance. But we'll see what happens. Just like with Donald Trump. I don't know. I'm guessing Donald Trump's found somebody else to take his MAGA hats and all that other stuff that they turned off and didn't allow him to sell after January 6th. But I simply don't know. But it all comes into disarming you. Because if they can disarm your ability to make money, they can disarm your ability to buy property because you have no money. They can disarm your ability to leave the country to find something else because they're turning off your money, your passport. They're turning off your information, your ability to access the internet, to even research where you would go, what you would do. These are all the tools of government to disarm you. So, long story short, fight back against anything that even remotely resembles an attack on any of the four things I just talked about. Because they are all intertwined. They are all arsenals with which you can pull something out to try to push back against the government. And there's a reason why they're going after those specifically. Now, if that stressed you out thinking about all that, I will tell you a way that you can relieve a little of that stress, and that is by going to PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Yes, PalomaVerdeCBD.com, run by two libertarians, a libertarian couple, if you will. And they have some of the finest CBD products out there. Tinctures, salves, lavender scrubs. Maybe not a scrub, but I know they have a lavender solvent. I just literally today, I was golfing this morning. I went and did back and arms yesterday at the gym, right? Felt great about myself. Some chick hit on me in line at the grocery store. She was in the National Guard. She was warning that we were going to get locked down and curfewed next week. I told her I believed her. And I fucking do believe her. But I must have tweaked something. And this morning I'm out golfing and, I haven't played in a while. We had no warm-up time, so I'm going with a buddy of mine before work. Whacked that first shot immediately. I'm like, fuck, I'm screwed. So I'm going to use some CBD and relax, rub it in there, and get my my little respite from the pain I'm in right now. They also have, if you want your dog to chill out, they got stuff for pets too. Check that out. Use promo code ROAR, ROAR, at PalomaVerdeCBD.com, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Promo code ROAR. You are going to get 25% off an order of $75 or more. Free shipping, guys. Check that out. Give them some ducats. They are good peeps. Okay, coming back in. Oh, by the way, I'll tell you a funny little story. Talking about, so I was debating coming out and doing a little background thing, right, with dry ice, because my kid's birthday party is, and don't worry, this is going to kind of come around to what I'm going to talk about in a minute, but my kid's birthday party is coming up this weekend. Of course, we're not making sure anybody's vaxxed. We're not making any kids wear fucking masks, because my kid has to wear masks in school now. But not just a cloth mask, not just a cute little cloth mask, which she was excited to wear, right? Because my kid's been indoctrinated now. She's a mask Nazi, my little girl. She's like, mask, put the mask. Like, great, wonderful. I'm like, Daddy doesn't have to wear a mask. Ugh. No, just kidding. I don't beat her, not yet. But they're making them wear the stupid pretend medical masks, which are the paper masks, which don't do anything. They don't do any more than the cloth masks. But California, in all its wisdom, and I believe the CDC as a whole, has recommended that all schools force children to wear paper masks rather than the cloth masks. They don't fucking do anything. Again, the microns go right through them. We all know the N95 or N98 masks are the only ones that do anything. And even those, dubious and are not made for long-term wearing or usage. Whatever. Coming back to the story. So we're having this party this weekend. My wife orders a bunch of ice cream from this brand called Jenny's, which if I wasn't sure they hate me and everything I stand for, I would hit them up for free ice cream after giving them a plug on this show. But it's really good ice cream. Jenni. Jenni. Jenny's ice cream. So we get it shipped to us, and it comes with dry ice. And I'm like, oh, man, I should totally get this dry ice, pop it in some water, and emerge like I'm out of a WWE wrestling video, come storming out here onto the stage. And I decided against it, mostly because I had a horrible experience when I was working as a kid. I was like 17 years old, 18 years old, working at Sesame Place, which is a theme park back on the East Coast, the first and only theme park for Sesame Street. It was located next to a mall in the middle of fucking nowhere in Fairless Hills, Pennsylvania. And they're building one in San Diego now, by the way, but this was the only one that existed at the time. And I was a guy that walked around doing acting and stuff. I was doing like a spooky kooky castle magic show and strolling characters like a pirate. Just having a good old time as a kid. But the one day there was a parade right down Main Street. Every theme park has a parade. And I'm going down Main Street and I'm in this like nerd character, right? It was like a not Billie Holiday. Shit, what is his name? The guy that died, like, along with the Big Bopper. Anyway, kind of a dorky guy with glasses and a checkered jacket, right? Kind of like an old school piano riffing guy. And I dance around, and I was doing this thing where these people come around with coolers, and they have popsicles in them. And they have dry ice in the cooler to keep the popsicles frozen in the hot, hot sun of the Philadelphia region in the summertime. And I'm dancing around, and I stuck my hand in the cooler, and I'm pretending that the whale popsicles in the cooler were eating my hand. So I'm like, and I'm trying to make all the little kids laugh, and they're just loving it. And I pushed my hand in too deep and burned the flesh off of my back of my hand so badly. It just like giant scar, a good third of my hand from just pressing against that dry ice for too long. Gave me a nice ice burn. So no dry ice for the show today, guys. Long story short. Maybe if it's still around, maybe for the boring podcast tomorrow night, I'll break it out, which you guys should listen to, by the way. The Boring, Bohring podcast. Me, Rico, Howie, Odie, just being hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. There's nothing out of bounds on that show, and it's quite hilarious, and you'll enjoy it. So join us there. We do it live, 7 p.m. every Wednesday Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern time. Join us, won't you? So one thing I was laughing at as I shake my head at the mass cult psychosis, right? As I shake my head at the ongoing vax conversations, as I shake my head about the continued ignoring of Ivor, right? I'm going to try to not to get us flagged, so I'm going to try to use keywords now. Let's just call it Ivor. Despite the fact that it has been used, that studies have come out showing again and again that it is highly effective, not just in India, but now other studies have come out showing that Ivor is a key and lowers the rates of death and hospitalization by something like 56%. You have the Omicron variant, right? And we know that this is a far weaker variant. We know that it's not putting people in the ground. It's not putting people in the hospital, that most people don't even know they have it, or they have it and they get over it. We also know it's not a pandemic of the unvaccinated, as keeps being repeated, even though it's patently untrue. And we also have people saying that, well, it's only unvaccinated that are in the hospital. Also patently untrue. In the UK, 80% of the people in the hospital are vaccinated. Here in the United States, you're seeing people and rates something like still 30 to 40% are vaccinated, unless you're lying, like the governor of New Jersey, who said that they had 600 COVID cases in the hospital and 4 of them were unvaccinated. Right. I'm sorry, 4 of them were vaccinated. That's utter garbage. There's no way that's statistically possible considering everyone else's rates, but I digress. Point being, between all the people that have had it, between all the people with natural immunity, which the CDC itself said is now more potent, better lasting and more effective, especially against Omicron, we must be nearing somewhere near herd immunity. Despite this, you have Rachel Walensky coming out and saying that we need an overhaul of our public health system. Now, that's pretty astounding considering the fact that the CDC and its terrible recommendations has put the country in the position it is, which is namely, you have supply chain issues, you have people out of work, you have great resignations going on, you have people that simply have accumulated so much wealth sitting on their asses they don't want to go back to work. You also have created a sub-industry where the testing, the injecting, the shipping, the X, Y, and Z, the people that have to be on site to monitor COVID protocols, right? In the industry out here, like in Hollywood, the entertainment business, they have people that just sit on their asses, 2 or 3 of them, or depending on how big the size of the sets are, maybe even more, that just sit on their asses and monitor COVID protocols to make sure everything's going right. You have created an industry based around COVID. And that's not even adding to the amount of pharmaceutical infrastructure you've built out, the billions of dollars paid to these companies. But no, even though Omicron's getting weaker, even though we see places like the UK giving up all of their COVID protocols and saying these things haven't worked and we're done with them, no more masking, no more vax passports. Well, no. Rachel Walensky, or Raquel, or whatever the fuck her name is, she says we have to rethink our approach to tackling COVID-19 by rebuilding the nation's public health system. Now, she's saying that as it enters its 3rd year, they need, because it's going to turn endemic, which it, by the way, already is endemic. She says, quote, I really think people have thought this is the CDC's responsibility to fix public health in the pandemic. The CDC alone can't fix this. Businesses have to help. The government has to help. School systems have to help. This is too big for the CDC alone. You know what? I agree with her that it's too big for the CDC alone. You know why? Because you can't control a virus like this. You can't control a rhinovirus specifically. There is no vaccine that has ever worked for a rhinovirus. There's a reason that we don't have vaccines for rhinoviruses because they've been proven not to work ever in the history of the world. And yet, they didn't think this earlier on, right? They didn't think that it was too big for the CDC to take on previously. They didn't think it was too big to order people to lock down in their houses. They didn't think it was too big to shut down businesses. They didn't think it was too big to force students to stay home. They didn't think it was too big to literally remove all public education from the playing field and then pretend that doing it over Zoom was somehow a better option to the tune of 50% more failures. No. We need to really go for far more investment into the CDC, right? That's what they need. And she's calling for, well, let me try to find this exact what she wants. I can't find it. She's saying that she wants a massive investment into not just more hiring of public nurses here, in different states, more hiring of emergency room staff, but also, let's not forget, they want way more administrators. They want way more data crunchers. They want way more statisticians. That's a tricky one. Say that 3 times fast. Statistician. Ugh. Good luck. This kind of reminds me of the education system, right? All of these teachers' unions, all of these government assholes, they call poverty, they call malpractice in education, saying, if only you would give us more money. If only you'd give us the money and the tools we need to succeed, we could turn this boat around, right? And this is a boat that's been sinking ever since the federal government took over education, by the way. At least before, it was state by state. You had some states that were excellent. You had some states that were shitty. But it wasn't just universally shitty like it is now. So they say we're going to right the ship. What happens? They keep investing. Over and over and over again, millions and millions of dollars. You have school districts getting way more money than they ever had in the past. If you look at just the increase over the last 5 years, it's insane. It's like 200% more per student. But where does that money go? Oh, administrators. Oh, more executive staff. Oh, to this and that. Not to the actual teachers involved. And then they say, oh, this is still a problem. And by the way, I don't think the teachers should get paid more money. If I'm being perfectly honest, I do not think they should be getting paid more money when they get 3 months of the year off, when they have so many benefits, they have so many paid days off, they have the best retirement funding out there, where these people don't have to worry about putting their kids in daycare or sending them off to summer camp so they work over the summer, which is another expense that nobody calculates into the amount of money and time that costs people. But this reminds you of the similar thing, right? So instead of investing that money, let's say we did fund the CDC. Not that I think that investing a ton of money into nurses and emergency room doctors is going to make sense when we're not in a pandemic / even if it's endemic. But if it becomes endemic, it's just the cold. And as we're seeing, the hospitalizations, the death rates are not skyrocketing. As we're seeing, the world's not stopping. People are going about their daily lives. People are realizing this has all been a con and that the wool's been pulled over our collective eyes, nose, and mouths, with these masks. And that it's time to just simply get back to life, get back to work, get back to controlling what we do without living in fear. So when I hear we need more statisticians, when I hear we need more data crunchers, when I hear we need more emergency room staff, all I hear is we're looking to waste more money and we're looking to create more fear. Because what started all this COVID culty craziness in the first place? Stats, figures, bad modeling. Was it Nigel Ferguson, right? Or I think I fucked his name up so many times. I think it's Nigel Ferguson. The guy over at the Royal College that released that first barrage of death rates that was so catastrophic that it set every government in the world set off on locking people in their houses and destroying their economies and destroying people's lives. And almost 3 years later, we're still in the midst of it. I put that squarely at the feet of statisticians and data crunchers, none of whom are acting in good faith, all of whom are acting to accentuate, to empower, to grow the government. And this Walensky chick is just one more. And also, is it going to help? I mean, she refused to correct the basics of misinformation, their favorite word, that was put out by a Supreme Court justice, by Sotomayor. Now, thank God they struck down the OSHA mandate. By the way, OSHA's completely given up on that. It's gone. It's dead. It's not going to be around anymore. But Sotomayor said 100,000 kids were sick in the hospital, with many of them on ventilators. And then when this piece of shit that heads up the CDC was questioned on Fox News about it, she could not even muster up the barest honesty to tell viewers, yes, Sotomayor is very wrong. This is all incredibly incorrect. No, instead she repeated, and I counted 8 times in the interview, that you have to get vaccinated, that you have to get boosted. Even though we've seen the boosters don't work, the boosters have provided limited protection against Omicron. The vaccines don't seem to provide much of any protection against Omicron. And yet Pfizer and I think one of the other ones, Moderna maybe. Oh, guess what, guys? They're working on a brand new shot for Omicron. What's the point? By the time it's out, we'll be on to a new variant. I'm seeing more people get sick after having a shot than I am people that are perfectly fine after getting the shot, walking around who didn't need it in the first place. And I'm also remembering that Pfizer's own CEO literally told us there's not going to be any more vaccines that make sense at this point. We think we're beyond that. Like, this is Pfizer's own CEO. And the reason I surmise is because Pfizer's got a pill that they're going to try to get people to take to combat the rhinovirus that they're going to mandate we all do from now on. But no, of course, because there's money to be made, even if it doesn't have to work, because we've seen it doesn't need to work. Pfizer and X, Y, and Z are creating this new booster vaccine for the Omicron variant. Just unbelievable. But yeah, going back to this investing in the CDC, overhauling public health, getting businesses involved. You try to get businesses involved with the OSHA mandate. It got struck down. If you try to get businesses involved again, it'll get struck down again because you're overstepping your constitutional boundaries. If you try to get this embedded into the education system, again, information control, developing soldiers, developing complicit people that are just going to kowtow to the information passed down to the state, and now their medical freedom being at risk. Well, I got to go push back against that too. I don't need the education system getting involved in healthcare matters. Those things should maintain complete separation. And of course, data, stats, wonderful. They haven't helped you told the truth any time during this pandemic. The CDC knows how many people were vaccinated versus unvaccinated in hospitals. They've known how many people died from COVID with COVID for months. And they haven't put it out there to allay public fears, right? Only very recently did Fauci finally admit what they've known for months. But this woman wants to heavily invest in the CDC just so they can lie to us more, so they can manipulate us more. It's insulting. It's just absolutely insulting. My God. Now, this is funny. The end of this article, well, near the end. Actually, it's an incredibly long article, but I love this. It's so funny. So they're portraying this. This is on Politico, which of course left-leaning, but they're calling it a shift in strategy. Not that the CDC has miserably failed at all fronts on this pandemic, that they've been wrong in everything they've recommended from the start of this pandemic. But they're saying her shift in strategy comes as the Biden administration scrambles to safeguard the nation against COVID-19 and keep the economy afloat as it prepares for the possibility of new, more transmissible variants. Now, the Biden administration is scrambling because they know that COVID's turning against them. The public sentiment has turned against them heavily and against Democrats heavily. The Democrats are terrified they're going to be completely routed in the midterms, which is 100% going to happen. And this chick is simply a tool of the Biden administration. She's a tool of the Democratic machine. So she's operating as such and trying to displace blame, try to adjust the strategy to give people some idea that they have any fucking clue what they're doing, which they don't. And I love this, right? So he says, I would love to say I know exactly where we are in regards to new, more transmissible variants. I would love to say I know exactly where we are because I think people really do want to know. But the most important thing that we can say is we don't know exactly where we're heading. Only true thing this chick has ever said. That's it. That's the only true thing she has ever said. Now, do you want to see some of what these women have wrought? These scions of the pharmaceutical industry? Because I'll show you, right? If you want to see how this turns out, how this plays out in the public, and this is one of the funniest things too, because you're going to see two progressive babies, right? Two children of absolute nonsense birthed into the world, which is, as I said, the cult of COVID versus the cult of racism is overarching and is the most important issue of our day. You're going to see them come to the head here in the most confusing manner. I mean, you're going to see two, and it's, what are the most evil people in the world right now? Progressive white women, right? Progressive white women. You're going to see two older progressive white women masked up in an elevator, screaming and attacking a black man who is not wearing a mask in an elevator. And I'm just going to leave the end of it so you can experience it, the little cherry on top here. So let me cue this up and play it for you. Hopefully I can not overlap it so it doesn't get all screwed up. But this is from a Twitter feed. Drew Hernandez shared this video, and it is fucking dynamite.
Get out.
Get out.
Yo, stop.
Get out. Get out.
What you guys doing? Get out.
Get out.
What you guys doing?
Get out.
What's wrong with
Get out.
you?
Get out. Don't touch me.
Don't you have
Do
kids?
not touch me.
Get out.
Do not touch me.
Get out. I'm not touching you.
Do not
Oh,
touch
did you just hit me? Did
Do
you
not
just
touch
hit me?
You just hit me.
You just hit me? You too?
Black Lives Matter.
Yo,
Black
this is
Lives
racist. Wow.
Get out.
it is.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives
Black
Matter.
Lives Matter.
Stop. Yo, stop. Stop recording. I don't know you. Yo, you need to stop.
Get
No,
out.
I'm not getting out. I was here
Yes, you
first.
are.
Get out.
Get out.
Yo,
Get
stop.
out. Get out. Get out.
All right. Anyway, that's enough of that. Basically, what happened, as I said, black guy in the elevator, no mask. Two old white chicks in the elevator. Now, granted, maybe they're not speaking English as a native language, right? I'll acknowledge that. It might not be their native language, but they freak out because he's not wearing a mask. Get out. Literally, the chick, when he says, did you hit me? She hits him with his phone. They're videotaping him, right? And he's videotaping them. They're videotaping him, hit him with the phone, shoving him out of the elevator, forcibly, trying to force him out of the elevator because he isn't wearing a mask. And then when he goes, this seems pretty racist here. Then they yell, Black Lives Matter. Right? Now, here's what I'm trying to figure out. What's going through these people's minds? Are they trying to yell Black Lives Matter at him because they're trying to say we support the cause of Black Lives Matter to try to do, we're not racist, even though I'm screaming at this dude for not wearing a mask and in an elevator who happens to be black. We're not racist. We just are psychotic because we think we're going to die of COVID, right? And I guarantee these chicks are triple vax, triple boosted. They both got their pretend medical masks on, right? Not the N95s, but the ones that they tell you should wear now that don't do anything. Yelling Black Lives Matter. Okay, is it to say we support Black lives, but we don't support you because you made a decision about your medical and your level of risk that we don't agree with, right? But, Black Lives Matter. Or are they saying that he's evil and thus should be beaten because Black Lives Matter and he does not value his own black life nor that of his family and friends because he dares to go out in public and not wear a mask? That's your question of the day. That's your question of the day. And I dare you to try to figure out which one it is. I dare you. Tweet it at me. Let me know which one you think it might be. All right. Now, to wrap it up, I still forgot to do my Idiots and Assholes song that Josh did for me, but AKA Toady. But I wanted to share this too, because this is it's a 3-minute, 36 long clip. And you know what I should do? I'll put in my earbuds here so I can just talk over it without having too much echo going on. But Brian Stetler, right? Just such a little rat fucker. He goes in. And he is, let me make sure my damn audio didn't switch over too, because sometimes it does. Damn sons of bitches. There we go. Switched it back so it sounds nice. So Brian Stetler goes in, CNN's own host of reliable sources. He goes into an 8th grade classroom learning news literacy because he wants to make sure that they know the difference between what is misinformation and what is not misinformation. Now, I want to share this because I just think it's too funny. I mean, this to me, I watched this tape, right? I watched this video of Brian Stetler in there, and I was like, this looks like Scared Straight, but in reverse, right? Like usually the kids go to the prison to get yelled at and scared by prisoners, right? Oh my God, we're going to be gang raped in here. We better not commit crimes, right? But they're seeing what happens if they go to prison, if they do those things. Brian Stetler's bringing all the evil in the world right to them. He's literally coming in and misinformation raping them right to their faces because he is responsible for so much misinformation. CNN is responsible for so much just lies, utter lies to the public that it is too rich. So let me share this now. We can watch it together and enjoy a fantastic time. And by the way, I recommend you guys watch the video, get on Twitter, get on our YouTube, get on Odyssey, find us there. We don't know how long it'll be on YouTube, so subscribe to Odyssey. By the way, if you subscribe to Odyssey, you also can get some of our live streams, most of which are going to go behind the paywall, but we are going to start streaming live to Odyssey to try to get your asses over there, because we want to build that channel up. So when YouTube eventually deplatforms us, which they do and which they will, we have our base over there ready to rock with us. And also, we don't get stuff pulled down over there because Odyssey doesn't do that. Okay, without further ado, here is, again, a 3 minutes, 30 seconds. I'll just kind of talk over it here and there.
Good morning.
Barbara King wants to arm this 8th grade class
All right, so today's topic is
Weird
misinformation.
with the tools they will need in a world of information saturation.
We're going to learn to identify the various types of misinformation.
And there is a lot to learn.
They're called satire, false context,
Satire is not
imposter
misinformation, by the way.
content, manipulated content, and fabricated content.
Just imagine trying to make sense of all of this as a teenager.
You're
Now
too
we go
stupid to
imposter
understand the
content. What does
difference.
imposter mean?
Like someone trying to be someone else.
Someone trying to be someone else, right? You hear that word, what's an imposter? So an imposter content uses either a well-known name, a brand or a logo to fool people into believing that it's authentic.
Now, again, that could also be satire. Let's just say, like, I can't believe they're categorizing misinformation as satire. I guess this is because people are too stupid. And yes, we've seen this all the time. There's a great site called, Not the Onion. Or I'm sorry, it's not the Onion. There's a site called Not the Onion that's funny too. But there's literally a site dedicated to documenting people too dumb to understand when something is satire, right? Sites like The Onion, sites like the Babylon Bee. So maybe that's what she's talking about. But to label it as misinformation is misinformation. I mean, the irony is right there, right in front of you. But it's so absolutely ignorant, so stupid. This is where we've devolved as a society, where people view humor, right? And this is why the left cracks down on comedians that dare to go against the narrative. This is why The Daily Show is unwatchable. This is why people like Sarah Silverman have turned on comedy. This is why people like, Louis C.K., before he got slapped on the wrist, turned on comedy. This is empirically why this is happening, because the left is seeing the narrative get shifted. They're afraid of what's going to happen if they allow anybody to mock them. So they have to label it as misinformation.
As the web becomes even more of a Wild West every day, the students here at PS...
Also, I'm going to stop this a lot, by the way, because it pisses me off all the way through it. The web is becoming more of a Wild West? I'm sorry, Brian Stetler. Have you been to the internet in the past 10 years? Did you see what the beautiful thing that was created used to be? Have you seen what social media used to be? Twitter, MySpace, Facebook even at its start, where they didn't censor information, where you'd have fucking fact checkers making sure that you're not going against what the government says or going against what the activists say or going against whatever the adopted narrative of the progressive left is of the day. Have you been there? Because it was a wonderful place. That was the Wild West. That was where you could go and be free and homestead and not worry about them deplatforming you if you got too popular. Or Neil fucking Young, what a goddamn rebel, calling for big tech, calling to Spotify to pull Joe Rogan's podcast off because God forbid Joe Rogan has an opinion where his stupid music is playing.
PS 207 in Queens, New York, know that they need these lessons.
A lot of students have social media, and if they're looking at stuff that is wrong and just telling everyone that it's right, and they're just giving everyone false information.
King began teaching media literacy 7 years ago. Why the initial impulse to teach about this?
I feel it's a skill that my students really need. There's too much misinformation around us in the world, and I want to give them some tools to make sense of what they're seeing.
She uses curriculum from the News Literacy Project, a nonpartisan education.
All right. In hindsight, actually, let's just in real time, let's see where the News Literacy Project gets its funding from. Let's see who their partners are. And that'll teach us a lot about the secrets behind what this actually is. Okay, let's see. Let's go to the bottom here. Because most places, they'll have their funding listed. Okay. Join us for facts. Frequently asked questions. Let's see. Oh, they have the gold seal of transparency, which is hilarious. Is it nonpartisan? It says they are. Yeah, they're not telling me exactly who. Members of our board of directors and our National Leadership Council have worked across the political spectrum and have backgrounds in education, journalism, communications, businesses, and nonprofits. Okay. About media partners. Let's see who their media partners are. Oh, 60 Minutes, ABC News, the AP, Bloomberg, BuzzFeed, CBS News, Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Tribune, CNN, the Financial Times, the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, Politico, the Philadelphia Inquirer, NPR, the Pulitzer Center, KPCC, Univision, USA Today, the Washington Post, Vice News. Yeah. Okay. So what we see here is that their nonpartisan national education nonprofit News Literacy Project is funded by only mainstream news sources who work hand in hand with governments, who work hand in hand with each other to control the narrative and as gatekeepers for what is quote unquote truth, what is quote unquote untruth, what is quote unquote misinformation, even though they get the fucking stories wrong 90% of the time. They're the ones that lie us into wars. They're the ones that fearmonger the country into believing that COVID's going to come and kill everyone they know. They're the ones that are conning everybody into believing that climate change is going to kill them tomorrow and that the racism is going to overtake every neighborhood, that we're going to be in a race war any day now. They're the ones that convince you your child's going to be kidnapped off the playground every time they go out unsupervised. They're the ones that are going to convince you that your neighbor's going to come over, shoot you in the face with a gun if we don't have legislation put into place, on and on and on and on. And of course, they're the ones that attack any other news information source as illegitimate and want them deplatformed, want them censored, want them removed from the public conversation, from the public square. Well, so there you go.
Nonprofit. Founder Alan Miller says these lessons are now used by more than 37.
And by the way, this is a fucking commercial by CNN for the News Literacy Project. And I guarantee you're going to see more of these. Watch. If you watch cable news, I don't, by the way. I only saw this because it was on Twitter. If you watch cable news, you're going to see these types of stories about this News Literacy Project across every single platform. Mark my words, it's coming because this is a coordinated effort to try to convince people that there is one source to be trusted and that misinformation is a huge problem, that you can't trust any other source other than this News Literacy Project. You're also going to see this get fact-checked. They're going to be involved in fact-checking misinformation on your social media platforms. Watch and see.
7,000 educators.
What do I mean by I want you to critically think about what you're seeing on the internet?
The goal is to equip future generations of savvy news consumers.
So in the picture, it looks like a car is like on a highway and there's like a shark in the water.
And okay, so what are we looking at? We're looking at what type of a social media?
Only the most important content. Kids, is there a shark in the road here? By the way, that looked like it was real to me. I believe there was a shark in the road.
What kind of account is that?
Twitter.
It's an infamous fake, one that gets reshared every time there's a hurricane. And these students are sharing tips so they don't get fooled.
On Google, there's this little picture of a camera, and you can add the image in there, and it will reverse search it.
Yes.
So
anybody
ultimately,
can find
news
where the
literacy is
images
about
came.
something bigger. It's about
Easy
basic
enough.
critical thinking skills.
Correct.
How do you try to connect those dots?
Now, wait a second, again, the irony of this. Critical thinking skills are something that our education system, our media environment, and our government are trying to eliminate. When you see every news agency, and by the way, in context of our social media usage and sharing and the conversations we have, taking critical thinking out of the mix is part and parcel into what they're trying to do. This is how divisiveness is spreading in America, right? So when I see news literacy classes trying to quote unquote instill critical thinking skills, I call bullshit. They're trying to remove critical thinking skills from the equation so that you are not thinking, you are simply imbibing what is being told to you. Critical thinking involves questioning. Critical thinking involves finding your own solutions, your own application of the information that you're taking in and coming to your own conclusion. That is critical thinking. Critical thinking is not simply taking a narrative and running with it. So if anything, if they want to inspire critical thinking, they should tell people to take one piece of information and then try to find other pieces of information that can either support it, but more importantly, that might contradict it, to find an educated point of view and then use their critical thinking skills of logic, not just fucking fear. Use your logic side of your brain to actually come up with an opinion.
Well, to me, this is a real world problem. It's very easy to bring that in when they start.
This chick, by the way, has a
realizing I can
haircut
utilize
straight out of the
these skills in
1945s.
anything that I do.
That specific year.
After the class, students told me the lessons hit close to home. Do any of you feel like you try to correct friends or family now based on what you've learned?
Of course they do.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like when COVID first started, like my family thought that, wow, this is a hoax, but then I'm like, this is real. Like people are really dying, getting sick from it. I really just wanted to believe that it was fake, because I didn't want that to really happen to me. But
look, oh my, I'm like losing my mind here. Of course, naturally, you knew that was what he was going to say. You knew that was what he was going to say. No, you know what? Nobody thought COVID was a hoax, right? I can tell you, I mean, maybe there's the very, very fringe conspiracy theorists, and even that is not misinformation. That's a knee-jerk opinion based upon the fear-mongering that was pushed out there. And you know what? If we're being honest, if we're being empirical in our assessment of, and using our critical thinking skills, of what happened, you could argue that COVID, as it was presented to the population, yes, was a hoax. Now, I'll call it a scam because it enriched everybody at the top of the food chain, especially with Big Pharma, and basically crushed the small businessman, the individual underfoot. But if you're looking at what we were promised, which is that millions were going to die within the first month of COVID rolling out in each country across the world, right? To a death toll in the first month of, 70 million people. Well, that didn't happen. Everything they told us would happen didn't. So if that's not a hoax, what is the definition of a hoax, right? If Orson Welles has a hoax where he's talking about Martians invading, and we look outside and Martians are not invading, however, the townspeople, because they were told that a Martian invasion was imminent, that there were flying saucers outside shooting everybody, if the townspeople went out and reacted as such, right? Freaked out, all the store shelves were empty, they got all their vaccines, they got injected, they stayed home, they masked up, right? It still doesn't mean the Martian invasion happened. It just means that people reacted as though it happened. And yes, people die of COVID. People are still dying of COVID. But when you have numbers that were reported by the government that now are vastly overinflated, and we know that to the tune of something like 30, 40, maybe even 50% of the population, and also not subsected by, even the CDC has admitted, the majority of people, almost 90% of these people, right, had 4 or more comorbidities. That's a hoax. We have been fooled. We have been lied to. That's what that means. That is the definition of a hoax. But please, Brian Stetler, tell me more about how the children should be educating their parents on reality, these fucking kids that are just now going back into classrooms.
But it was real, and it just changed everyone's lives, honestly.
But that gets to the motivations of you want to believe something, but you got to face reality head on.
Other like fake articles, like maybe you want to believe it, but like it's not true, and you have to like research if it's really true or not.
More traffic into this fake site.
They also said their peers would benefit from this class. Do you all feel like every student needs to be learning news literacy?
There it is, guys.
Yeah.
There it is. There it is. You got that? You catch that right at the end there? Do you feel that every student should be learning news literacy? Yes. There you go. There's the bow around the package that's being pitched here. Government education centers are for indoctrination. The news media wants to pair and partner with government in order to control what your children think, what your children learn, what news is true, what government narratives are passed through to them that cannot be questioned. Of course, the Center for News Literacy, run by all of the biggest news corporations in the world who want to control where your news comes from, of course they want every child in the American public schooling system to have to take this course, to be convinced that everything they see that doesn't come from a CNN or an ABC or a Reuters or an NPR is fake news and can't be trusted. That is what this was all about. And that is what's going to end this show, guys. So remember, also at the end of this, before I sign off, to check out Burning Daylight from our buddy Matt McKinley. Great podcast, liberty, cattle wrangling, drinking, cavorting, good times. Great guy, Matt McKinley. Love that guy. Check his podcast out, Burning with an apostrophe on the end, anywhere podcasts are heard. And don't forget, we have a Lions of Liberty network here. So we've got Mark Claire on Mondays with the Lions of Liberty, or Lions of Liberty with Mark Claire. We've got John Odermatt, of course, on Thursdays with Finding Freedom. I almost said Felony Friday. And me here on Electric Liberty Land every Wednesday for you. We all have individual feeds, guys, so check those out. I will be putting out bonus shows, bonus rants on the Electric Liberty Land feed. So go and subscribe to it. Subscribe to all three. Be kind. And then rewind if you want to hear some of our episodes on those different feeds, as well as staying subscribed to our main feed here, because I'm putting together a Libertarians in Living Room Drinking Liquor bonus that will only be on this main feed. So there's something different on each feed, but you can, of course, just stay subscribed to the whole. It's up to you. I'm just letting you know that each one's going to have a little something, something. And yes, we've heard you out there in Patreon land. We are going to, I think, make the effort and probably going to put all of the content on one feed for our Patreon subscribers. That's all the Patreon content, all the content from all three feeds in one. We just haven't done it yet, but we're talking about it. It's probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen soon. All right, that's going to do it, guys. Thanks for listening. Share the show. Tell a friend. Give me some reviews, especially if you're listening to the solo feed. I need some more reviews on that feed. Let's bump it up. And, of course, tell everyone you know that this is the greatest libertarian podcast network/shows on earth. That's it. For me, Brian McWilliams from the Lions of Liberty, from Electric Liberty Land. Always stay plugged in to liberty.